Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast for this week. I'm really lucky. Our special guest this week is Dan Wood, who's the Chief Officer for People and OD at Avon and Somerset Constabulary. So, first of all, Dan, Happy New Year, and also welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stephen. It's great to be with you. Thank
you. Yeah, really good. So in preparation today for Dan's had questions given to him beforehand, so he can prepare, and we're going to go through those questions. But Dan, so that people can get to know you, first of all, would you mind just giving us a description of your career history?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'm slightly unusual to find myself where I am, I think, of having not come through a professional kind of HR route, or certainly a traditional one anyway. So going right back, I went to school in Bristol and was told basically, Dan, I'm not sure you should come back to this sixth form because you probably won't pass your English exam. At which point I decided to go to further education college. So it was a kind of a prompt to go and do something that most kids didn't do back in my school, because most people went to the sixth form there. And I went to Filton College to do A-levels. I did English, despite being told that that was not the thing that I'd be able to do in life. And it went all right. It was fine. So I decided that I could do a publishing degree at Oxford Brookes University. And I spent 3 brilliant years there. It's a fantastic university, and I still fondly follow that to see how they're doing. As it happens, I actually had to take a year out during the course of my studies because I became ill with Legionnaire's disease. I'll tell you why in a moment. I was doing some interesting things outside of work that caused me to travel around a lot and stay in hotels and that kind of thing, which is apparently can have its dangers, believe it or not. But thereafter, I went to do a PGCE on the Fast Track Programme for Leadership and Management and Schools at Exeter University. And very sadly, again, that was slightly thwarted because my mother was unwell, and I returned home to sort of start to look after her, alongside which I took up temping roles. Very wisely, my mum had got me involved in sort of learning how to touch type from a young age and all that kind of thing, and made me take my CV down to the temping agencies to sign up so that I'd have an income during the holidays and that kind of thing, which was brilliant because it gave me an insight in lots of different organizations and businesses. But that's really what kind of landed me a job while I was back home looking after mum. I ended up in an organization called Skills for Health. And that's the UK sector Skills Council for Health, involved in workforce development, helping the sector to kind of deal with workforce challenges, setting occupational standards and so on. After having temped there, I was invited to take on a permanent job, which I did in the marketing department. I became their first website administrator. Back in the days when websites were fairly clunky old things. But there was a content management system, and I had to maintain the content going onto the website. And the organization was expanding a great deal at the time and growing, so it had built a marketing department. And again, I was invited to apply for a role that had a much broader marketing communications remit, and really kind of cut my teeth learning about how to communicate with all sorts of different organizations, public, private sector and third sector in health, all about the products and services that Skills for Health offered. I spent 9 years in that organization, ultimately then working in corporate governance, supporting non-exec directors and the board, and the chief exec, John Rogers, who's still there, actually working with the Workforce Development Trust, as it's called now. It's since expanded and absorbed all sorts of different entities and broadened its remit. So that was my sort of 9 wonderful years in the health sector. I even did some consultancy work as it commercialized its operations. So I ended up supporting all sorts of things from apprenticeship programs and helping organizations with kind of workforce development and OD challenges. I did that again with the NHS independent and voluntary parts of the sector. And then this job came up in policing, and it was sort of a stretch. It would have been a big jump for me. It was a head of strategy and planning, and I happened to know some people in the organisation, so I picked up the phone and said, "I've seen you've advertised this role. Tell me all about it. What's happening in the organisation at the moment?" They gave me a really good perspective on where the organisation, where policing was. So fairly speculatively put my application in, and landed up, a couple of weeks later in front of the then temporary chief constable and one of the chief superintendents being interviewed. And it kind of went okay. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed learning about them. I thought, yeah, this is something that could be a good career break for me. And shortly after, I was contacted back to say that someone else had got the job. So, okay, that's a shame. Let's carry on and see what else comes up. Anyway, some months passed, and as I was walking around the supermarket, as you do, the phone went, and they said, the other candidate, he's already a chief exec somewhere else, or whatever, had declined the opportunity. Something had fallen through on the role. Would I like it? So I said, yeah, why not? So that's how I ended up in policing, being their first kind of head of strategy and planning, coordinating all sorts of business planning and so on. And yet, as time went on, the role changed and expanded, and I ended up with several promotions, ultimately taking on a much bigger function with several hundred staff, looking after change management, digital services, audit and inspection, a whole range of sort of performance analytics, which incidentally Avon and Somerset has become a leading light on in policing in the UK and beyond. It's one of the things I'm sort of most proud of in my time here. After doing that for a few years and going through sort of periods of austerity and all sorts of rounds of service redesign and all the challenges that go with that, a role supporting the then chief officer in my current role as his deputy came up. I learned all about HR, people management alongside that, picking up the kind of CIPD stuff. And then when he went to South Wales University to be the chief operating officer, I applied for this job and have been doing that for the last few years. So I'm now nearing 8.5 years in policing, due to move very shortly in February to the University of the West of England as the chief people officer there. So that's the potted history. But I did say about the Legionnaires piece, alongside that, I've been volunteering for the Scouts, which has been a lifelong passion of mine. I've not done so much of it latterly simply because of work demands, but at the time we were launching a new programme for young people across the United Kingdom. So I've been, on planes, trains and automobiles to the length and breadth of the country in just about every other hotel going, some less than salubrious places, shall we say. Yeah. That's how I ended up catching Legionnaire's disease and a few months, stay in the lovely Neville Hall Hospital in Abergavenny.
Oh, wow.
So quite an interesting experience, but yeah, lots of stuff around work in terms of non-exec roles, trusteeship, school governor, etc., which I think has complemented my career really nicely.
Yeah, and even listening to you then about just the broadness of understanding where you've done work for the Scouts, that you've challenged yourself in different roles, because I heard that when you said about the big stretch and the challenge along that. If I just don't mind me asking, the first question you said, or the first answer you said, is the non-conventional way of HR and getting into that role. What kind of made you do that, like to push you into that or go for that role? Because some people would be put off going, well, that's not the normal route or to go down. What kept you going, or what kind of made you passionate about going into those roles?
Yeah, two things. One, advice and encouragement from someone who I admired and appreciated. And two, maybe a bit of a chip on my shoulder about, I don't feel I have an obvious career direction or, this idea of a profession, whatever that might be. And I'm kind of making it up as I go along, which you come to learn is the only way, actually. Of leading and working out how to get things done. So there was, that idea of getting that kind of badge of professionalism and learning something, through the CIPD that would, attract some value and recognition, but also then, the Chief Constable Andy Marsh at the time saying, Dan, you're just brilliant about people. You get the way in which people kind of think and feel about things, and we're a values-based organisation, and we need to shape our HR services in that way. and you've had some success around change management and so on. So can you come and apply that in the HR world? And I thought, yeah, great. I really rate you, Andy. If you can see there's something in that, then why not give it a go?
Yeah.
Say yes and worry about it later.
And it's so nice because even in my career, I've gone into some bigger, better roles. So better, I mean, as in broader, but I was encouraged to do them. And I think a good leader encourages people to move forward and try things new, take a risk, if that makes sense. I think that's really, really important as an authentic leader to encourage other people to move forward. So I can see that really resonating with yourself, which is great to share. And I love the way that you just said, I've made my career up as I go along and that. So I think that's brilliant, really refreshing, rather than being in silo.
It's helpful to have a general direction, isn't it? And to know, very often people ask that question of youngsters, don't they? What do you want to be when you grow up? And people think about job titles and roles, many of which never exist by the time you get there. But I think it's much better to think what it is that motivates and inspires you about work, and then to find that in different avenues as opportunities arise.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a really nice way of turning it on its head of what motivates you to do it, rather than I go for that job role, which is great. So, as you were growing up, Dan, who inspired you in kind of your life or career? Who inspired you?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned scouting already, but various mentors. Whether it was, the immediate leader in my group who always encouraged me and pushed me to do different things, or as I became involved in the national organization and internationally, senior leaders in the organization, in probably later times, the chief scout of the organization that I had the privilege to select twice over or play a significant role in selecting twice over at later points. But people who embodied a sense of purpose and values and a sense of mission and what they were doing that really spoke to me. So the reason why Scouts, because really it kind of spoke to me about the value of learning and education in ways that schooling and academic work didn't really click for me. I was always seen as that kind of late bloomer, slightly behind with the academic stuff, and I had to work very hard to catch up. But learning by doing, and small teams, and finding out about leadership and taking adventurous risks, and trying out new things and traveling and all that sort of stuff. I got it there. I got what learning and education was about, and those leaders spoke to that in me, really.
Yeah, and it's just to pick up on there, it's not just always about learning from a book, it's the practical side of learning and that sense of adventure and newness that people to try. So it's not just about watching a video, it's go and try different things and experience those things. I've heard you a couple of times say about values, which resonates with me brilliantly. So I really believe in values that are so important that they flow through organizations and the person as well. Why are values so important to you, Dan?
So that's such a big question, isn't it? But what else is there? I suppose is the sort of initial reaction that comes to mind. When you strip it all back, actually, if you don't stand for something, you don't stand on some kind of solid ground and take a position and have a view on what's important in life. What do I value? What matters to me? And what matters to others around me, then really what are we as human beings? So really that kind of sense of inner compass, to use another nice scouty kind of metaphor, kind of helping us find out where our true north is, where we're going, what the purpose and direction of our life is, and then to contribute in meaningful ways to others' lives, in hopefully ways that are complementary to their values and the organizations you decide to associate with. So I've always seen them as sort of guideposts and guardrails, if I can put it like that. Sort of they show the way, and they help remind you about where the boundaries and parameters of good conduct and good character lie. So that's how I think about it.
I was smiling then, Dan, because when you said about the North Star, I bore people with saying that's the purpose, the North Star that we're going to. So I definitely kind of resonate with me. And also, I love the bit about what matters. So when I've seen really good, thriving organisations and culture, people live and breathe their values and really knows what matters to. It could be their customers, their clients, their colleagues, etc. But it really kind of resonates. So I can kind of just smiling and echo everything you say there. So I really appreciate if you strip it all back, and I love the way you phrase strip it all back. What actually matters is really, really important. So yeah, you can see that.
So often, I mean, especially in these times, we've got sort of very tumultuous, uncertain world in which we live, and we're all sort of buffeted from every angle, aren't we? Whether it's by the media or politics, or just in the challenges of daily work life. And sometimes you've got to have an anchor somewhere to go back to say, well, what's really important here. And I think having a those guideposts and those guardrails to help you think through what do I do in any given moment, and then to try to integrate them into your life, so actually that becomes quite intuitive and natural. I think that's the only way to kind of be successful, get things done in a way that has integrity.
And the bit for me is about being genuine. So an authentic leader is what they say and do on an email, or when they speak to people, or in the presence of a presentation, etc. They're genuine. So you see that person in all facets, and that kind of resonates through. So Dan, how would you describe your leadership style? How would you describe that?
So I've probably borrowed this from somebody else, but it's a kind of follow me, I'm right behind you sort of style, I guess. Coaching and supportive. I think somebody who I think when the situation requires can be adaptable and kind of set the pace, and be a bit stronger, more authoritative and directive in approach. But that's not my preference. My preference is to work with and through other people, and try to bring out the best in them to create conditions in which people can thrive, and then to kind of coach and support them to do that. So I'm a kind of curious sort of person. I'm fascinated by people and human behavior. So I sort of get absorbed in what it is that makes other people tick, and try to just tap into that and find out how to motivate, inspire, and bring out the best in them. And different things will work in different situations at different times, but I'd like to think I'm somebody who tries to encourage individuals to be themselves, but be the best version of themselves.
And it's the bit there of as a leader, you've got to let people fall over, and you've got to let people try new things. Otherwise, they're not going to learn. And I think so many of us over the years through our careers have said we've learned the best things by falling over, and that made us better as a stronger as a leader, etc. And I love the way that you say about letting people then kind of have a go at it, encourage, etc. leadership, but then you coach afterwards, which is a really lovely way. So would you just tell me a bit more about kind of the coaching you do with colleagues, or the work you do with them?
I mean, I've done all sorts of coaching, but certainly, in the more formal sense. But informally, it is my style, I think, is to getting things done, and I try to try to start where people are at themselves, find out about them, take this very curious sort of approach, questions, and almost encourage people to think through for themselves. What's going to be the best way for me to tackle a challenge? What is it that's making me feel something about the particular thing I'm facing at the moment? Why might I have framed it in the way I have? So can I see that a bit differently? Are there options available to me that maybe I haven't considered? So I'd say, to prompt and kind of provoke thought about that. But I love what you said around sort of creating environments in which we can take risks and sometimes make mistakes and fail. None of us learn in any other way, I think. So that whole idea, again, sounding fanatical about the Scouts now, but it's a wonderful model, isn't it? Of right from a very young age, having the adventurous outlook of trying something you've never done before. But in an environment in which it's safe to fail, because there's good, experienced people around you that can help you through that and help you move on, take the learning from it, and be even better next time.
And the spiritual part of me is we're all human beings, aren't we? So we are going to make mistakes and we are going to fail, but actually it's about our opportunity to people to encourage, try new things, and really develop that way. That's what I find fascinating, and I found that in my career, echoing your career of letting people really have a go at new roles, really demonstrate, really try to do that, but then coach them afterwards about how it could have gone better or they could learn from that mistake, rather than I have seen in other industries where it's if I've made one mistake, that's their career ruined, or it's the fear then. So I just really love the way that you position it, that actually it's okay to make a mistake, but we can learn from that and coach and develop that person.
Yeah, and again, incredibly difficult in some environments, isn't it? Because when I operate in a policing context at the moment, I'm surrounded by people who are making life and death decisions every day.
Yeah.
You can't make the same mistake repeatedly in that
Yes.
environment. But equally, if you have people, even when the stakes are high, that aren't prepared to take calculated risks and to feel that there's the psychological safety, or that it's okay to raise things that have gone wrong. You never get better as an organization. And that's very easy to say when you're not in the the position of holding that accountability, because in environments like these, the media, rightly the public, and the standard setting bodies or the inspection bodies hold us to high standards, and there's accountability and scrutiny that goes with it. But I think all of them, when they think about it, would also want an environment in which their public service professionals feel that they can can develop and learn, and be human ultimately, because we need them to be human to be at their best and deal with some of the toughest things that we experience in life, and support us in that way.
Yeah. No, absolutely spot on, and very well put, really well put. And what would you say are the successful leadership traits that you see? So what would you kind of pinpoint as throughout your career? What would you say the most successful leadership traits are?
So I think I'd start with knowing yourself, actually,
Yeah,
which
good.
might be a slightly strange thing to start on. Maybe it's not the first thing that everyone thinks of when they think of leadership, but taking the time to actually reflect upon that whole thing about what do I believe in, what do I stand for, what's my approach, and then to reflect as you go on what could I have done better, and so on. I think that's absolutely integral to effective leadership, and in the course of doing it, to accept the imperfections and the frailties that, as you rightly put, we're all human, we all have, and that has in turn the impact of showing others that actually you understand what vulnerability feels like, and that you can connect with those fundamental motivators that each of us will have. And I think that's essential. So you have to know yourself in order to know other people, and spending some time thinking about that. What matters to me? What kind of leader do I want to be? What do I stand for? What do I believe in? All of that stuff is absolutely essential. You've also got to have some sense of where you're going or where you want to get to. And to be able to articulate that in a compelling way, a way that is persuasive, and that people lean into and want to hear more about. So you've got to be able to paint pictures, I think, with words to bring to life the destination and the direction of travel that you're hoping we might go. And I believe also great leaders try to then work on the conditions and the context to try to make sure that all the component parts are in place to enable people to thrive, because it's ultimately people that take you towards that destination, and you try and do that in a way that brings people to the destination, brings people with you along the way. As I say, gets behind people who are innovating and who are ahead of you, actually recognize, spots talent, and tries to galvanize teams behind that. So I think that's what leadership's really about. Know yourself so you can know and connect with other people. Think about destination and direction, and then how do you take people with you in that way.
And it's early on in my career, I thought I could do everything myself. So I thought the true leader is weakness is asking for help, support, other people, etc. And I thought, right, this, I can do it all. Steve can do it all himself, and that. And then I learned over the years that surrounding myself with sometimes better people than me, different ideas, different views, really shaped the team, brought in great collaboration, really creative thinking. And the other thing that it allowed me to do, and I really want to pick up on those compelling stories, painting pictures. It allowed me to do the things that I was good at, painting the pictures, telling the stories, the North Star, but it gave me freedom to breathe by using other people around me to help support and grow the team. So I just love the way that you put that there as well. So that was just kind of for all those leaders out there that don't try and do it by yourself, involve other people, because the people have got some great views out there.
There's that, we're sort of schooled, aren't we, to become technically good or good enough at the thing that we were doing up until the point that we're asked to do something bigger that we don't know how to do. And, the danger is that you stick to your knitting and you just kind of think that the task is the most important thing, when actually it's the team that get the task done. And it's the context that you have to take care of in order that the team can thrive. And it's really simple stuff, isn't it? But I love that John Adair model: task, team, individual, and then helicopter. And sometimes even looking at yourself, looking at that, is a great way of thinking about how you frame your contribution as a leader to setting those circumstances right.
Yeah, and just to echo that the John Adair model, I think for anyone listening in new to management or existed in management, it's a great model to get you to do a bit of self-analysis of, am I allocating too much to the individual, the team, the task? Where can I balance better to get that true potential? So yeah, really good share. Thank you ever so much for that. So we know your job's challenging. So how do you cope with pressure and that kind of part, Dan? How do you cope with that?
Yeah, well, look, if I'm really honest, in the past couple of years, there have been times when I thought I didn't cope that well. And I've had to really stop and think about, am I doing the right things here to stay resilient and stay fresh? And I rather suspect that that's relatable to many people listening, because we've had this, kind of hellish storm of different challenges, whether they be the pandemic or the economic or political circumstances going on around us, and that's been amplified into the microcosm of our lives, whether that's on a family level or an organizational level. So it would be odd, wouldn't it, if any one of us thought that we were all above and beyond that and we worked it all out. So really I haven't, and there are times when I don't think I'm not on top of it today, and I need to do something different. So I think that's the clue. That's the leaping off point, is sort of noticing that in yourself, noticing that you have a need to be met around, whether it's taking time out or just space and time to think, or you need to get a different take on something. Noticing when you need that, and then making the time for it, prioritizing it above the things that's burning right in front of you. Sometimes you've got to say, well, if I'm going to be able to deal with those things and go another day at this, actually I'll need the space to regenerate. So there's that, as well as noticing and having some of those different tools and tactics to kind of refresh and rejuvenate. Is kind of having the things that you love in life replenish you. And so for me, it's about family. It's about my loved one. It's about getting in the outdoors and gardening. It's about enjoying being with my dog, reading a great book. So these things, they are replenishing, and it's those kind of wells of energy that we draw upon in tougher times. So you've got to keep topping them up. So I mean, they are two things that I think are critical about resilience and getting through tough times.
And it's always the way people look at leadership of that they're always going to be brilliant at resilience, or they're always going to cope with things. But actually, it goes back to, again, of that, it is tough. And I know even in my career, I had some tough times, but actually the bit that was able for me was noticing it. I really like the way you said noticing that that it was tough. I think the other bit about replenishing and thinking about the good things of your family, walking the dog, gardening. I did smile then because I like gardening, so that's two of us in the world that like gardening. So, but it just helps you create that thought time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's really imperative when things are so busy, people do need to take time just to come out of their bubble and
Yeah.
just think, and it helps them see a bit clearer than actually keep kind of what I say, go kind of treading through the mud or
Yeah.
treacle, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And also, a change in the type of activity that you're doing. So if you're heavily engaged in, deep thinking, mentally tiring work,
Yeah,
actually to get up and do something physical,
yeah,
it just, releases something in us
yeah,
that makes us able to come back fresh and see something we couldn't see when we were staring at that
yeah,
page for 4 hours. So
yeah,
gardening very like that, isn't it? Because it's sort of, you get yourself your hands dirty, and it's sort of a visceral experience, but in a really gentle
yeah,
way. So just that you can just be,
yeah,
and things will come into your brain nice and
yeah,
gently,
yeah,
you're not necessarily reflecting upon in the
yeah,
busyness of life,
yeah,
and that in itself is re-energizing, I think. But you've got to find those passions, the things that you love, they're
yeah,
important. And then loads of stuff about just having some good, trying to keep some boundaries and disciplines and things.
yeah,
And I've read loads of things about us all being pinged with notifications, and the way that again creates chemical reactions in us,
yes,
and so on. They're great devices.
yeah,
Technology has done wonders for us, but if we let them master us, well, rather than we master them,
yeah,
to help our life be more organized and better, we'll just be cluttered by a different kind of clutter, if you see what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah,
I think you've got to have some kind of routines, disciplines, those sorts of things that enable you to keep things in perspective, keep things organized, make the most important thing the most important thing,
yeah.
you spend your time on.
And just to pick up on that, the word boundaries as well. So I remember when I moved from kind of middle management to more senior management, I realised in my mind I needed to set those boundaries. And actually, that was probably one of the best things I did. Otherwise, I would have been accessible to everybody 11, 12 o'clock at night, because that's what I thought when I was younger, that I had to be super accessible. That's the sign of a good leader. But then I realised moving from that middle management to setting boundaries, it enabled me to make me more effective at my job. I could concentrate on the work that was required. I could then actually then switch off. In those days, it was the BlackBerry. Switch off my BlackBerry,
Yeah,
an hour or two before I went to bed. And I've kind of taken that through with me, that I turn my phone or devices off a couple of hours before I go to bed, so I can start switching off, rather than it's not good for us, to have our phones next to a bed or something pinging or those kind of things. It's really stood me in good stead about those kind of boundaries and setting those daily behaviours.
yeah, and it's so easy to say, isn't it, but much harder to do,
Yeah,
because they're with us all the time,
yeah,
and as you say, whatever the habit is, put it in another room, put it
yeah,
some way away from where you're sleeping. Try and sleep well. I'm not a great sleeper, I have to say, so I have to find ways to really wear myself out as much as
yeah,
I can, and reading, activity, that
yeah,
kind of thing, and then I'm tired when it's time for
yeah,
bed. It's things like your eating habits and
yeah,
drinking and stuff like that. I mean, probably again, when I enjoy a glass of wine and that kind of thing, but that might not help with you sleeping if you've got a
yes,
busy
yeah,
day the next day and you have to be on top form.
yeah,
It's just thinking about when and how, and
yeah,
how much, and all of
yeah,
that is going to be.
yeah, no, definitely. So if we were to go back in time, what three tips would you give the younger version of Dan about authentic leadership? What three tips would you give yourself?
Yeah, okay. So number one, you're good enough as you are. Being you is a unique thing, a special thing,
Yeah,
and actually try to be the best version of you, not a version of somebody else who you think is better.
yeah,
um, and I think that's a recipe for tiring self-editing and whatever it might be. I mean, I in my life, some of the honest self-reflection and recognition of who you are and your identity is challenging, because for me, there's obviously a point in my life when I wasn't open about my sexuality, and now that's something that is absolutely fundamental to me. It shapes my identity, and needing to self-edit throughout a whole period of my young adult life is a tiring, exhausting thing to do. And I think the same is true whether it's not about something that's so fundamental and core to your identity, but if it's just more about your work style preferences or something else. If you try to be something you're not, you will inevitably be a less successful you than trying to be the best version of you. So I think knowing that bit of truth about the value in appreciating your difference is very, very important. I think there's something about kind of when it feels really tough and something in front of you looks impossible, the value in setting out about trying to see how you can tackle that anyway, and kind of saying yes to really difficult things, even though at that point you don't know that they're possible to achieve and you don't know how to work out. You don't have to have all the answers before you start something. Go into something with lots of questions, and develop the questions as you go, and then seek all the help and resources that there are around you. And that's probably the third point, is build great networks, people who you are inspired by, energize you, can learn something from, people who are very different to you. You might disagree with them very strongly, you might have a very different outlook, but all of these people, they enrich your perspective. And hopefully help, bring something to who you ultimately become. So I'd say surround yourself with lots of different people who are great in their own rights of being them.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, Dan. And also, I was just sitting there thinking, it wasn't till in my kind of mid to late 30s that, as a leader, I actually felt comfortable in my own skin. I'd kind of been in imposter syndrome, and I'd seen previous managers behave and thinking that I'm going to have to manage by fear, and I'm going to do. And it wasn't until in my 30s I thought, do you know what? I'm all right. I'm okay. I can do these things, and I'll do it in Steve's way. And they were then the best next kind of 10 years of my career, which was wonderful, and it felt so enjoyable, doesn't it? It feels like a big release off your shoulders, doesn't it?
And self-improvement journeys, they often foolishly have within them this need to compare, comparison. I think that is a route to some sort of destructive thinking if you're not careful. I think you've got to be careful about taking that to extremes. I think there's something about appreciating and liking what's good about you. Accepting we all need some affirmation, including positive self-regard, personal regard. Because that's healthy, and why shouldn't we deserve that as people?
Yeah, no, fantastic. And how would you support your team on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? How would you how do you currently support your team, Dan?
Yeah, so I guess I've got lots of different sorts of teams.
Right.
Put it like that. There are sort of temporary teams that are brought together for different things. There's my kind of core director and departmental team. There's a chief officer group that's leading the organization. So I think I belong to lots of different teams and play different roles and leadership roles within those. But I try to bring it back to a strengths-based approach to leadership. What are the unique things I can contribute to this team in this situation? So regularly, I try to help teams analyze and think about what's going on in any given situation, and then make some sense of it, because I'm quite good intuitively, I think, at absorbing lots of information and data in the broadest sense, including sort of more softer sensory stuff, to say what's actually happening right now, and how do we draw out from that the key things that we need to focus on. So helping people make sense of that picture, and sometimes a bigger picture than might occur to the team, and then helping the team to say, well, okay, if that's the case, what's our route, and where are we going? So I try to, with the team, spend time talking about our planning, and I try to get the team invested in setting some goals, both individually and collectively, and then sharing, discussing those. I think one of the things I enjoy doing is sort of navigating where there are points of friction, or difficulties or differences in perspectives to negotiate and navigate. So again, trying to be a facilitative person within that, and somebody that can, help restore and create reparation when things have not gone quite to plan. And then really just to listen a lot and tune into where people are at. And as I say, whether it's that personal coaching, the one-to-one stuff, or the team things, or the encouragement, or the just the I guess the kind word that helps to point out the greatness in someone else and builds people up, because we need people to tell us those things and to spot that in us. So I try to be conscious in my role in the team to playing to the strengths that I see in me, which I think are around those sorts of things, really, those sorts of habits.
And it's really good, because I'm a believer of playing to people's strengths, because the more you play to the strengths, other things will follow. Whereas I think if you play to people's weaknesses, they're going to feel down about it. They're not going to give it their best shot. They're not going to be committed to it. And then guess what? We tell them off because they weren't very good at it. So it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy at the end of the day. So I really like that. And I love the bit then, which people forget about, listening. Because as a leader, you can hear so many things, and people tell you things. They're not going to be sometimes overtly and say, I have a problem, but they may say, yeah, I'm struggling a little bit. That's for us as leaders to go, actually, I need to tune into that person and really kind of find out if they're okay. And then I like the last bit there about facilitating or navigating. I just, one of my beliefs, and other people know this, that leaders can't just take the paycheck for the good times. They have to take the paycheck for the people and the bad times, and facilitate and navigate around the issues. You can't just then pass it on to somebody else to deal with. You have to be there. And I think people respect that leader more, don't they?
I totally agree. I mean, you can't give away, can't abrogate that essential accountability that you hold. But what you can do is bring people in on it and support them with their responsibilities and accountabilities in a way that honors the reality of their experience, and that supports them through difficult times, because we've all had that. But ultimately, when you're carrying an ultimate leadership role for a team or something like that, the success or failure or whatever it is in between, the buck stops with you. You carry the can, and you should do that in a way that hopefully has a sense of kind of humility, and says to people, look, I care about getting this right, but I know there are going to be times when that's it's hard for us to have felt we've succeeded or to have got exactly the result we wanted. And what we must always try and do is take something from that so that we're better next time. But yeah, you can't give away that ultimate accountability.
Yeah, no, spot on. So the last question, the $64 million question, what's the self-development? What are you working on for Dan this year in 2023?
Yeah, I think it goes back to something that we've been talking about earlier in the conversation, which is just about making that kind of space and time for what we love, because that drives your kind of inner energy for getting difficult stuff done and overcoming challenges. So I want to refocus on things that I enjoy and things that I love, and make time for them. I think these have been an exceptionally difficult year for very, very many people, these last couple of years. And as I move into a different job in a different organization, hopefully, just speaking to that idea of learning, I'll take all the things that I've loved here, about the people, about the purpose and the mission that we have, and about performance and how to get stuff done, and try to translate that into a different environment, not such that it's applied formulaically, but so that the essence of it remains. And in that new context, I find different insights about how to apply those learnings in a new way. So I'm really looking forward to being re-energized by a new job, a new place, new people, and making sure I've got balance in my life around the time for the things I love.
Yeah. No, fantastic. So, Dan, can I just say a big thank you? The time's flown by for our conversation. I'm sure we could just talk for ages. I just want to say a really thank you for joining the Inspiring Thoughts podcast today. And I just wish you the very, very best for your new job and your new role. But you've been a wonderful guest today. So thank you so much, Dan. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks ever so much for inviting me, Stephen. Brilliant.